When I was a child, I often wondered, why do people wake up at 5:30 in the morning and go to parks and gyms and do a lot of exercise and put their bodies under so much pain and stress? And over that, they were not even having junk foods. I thought, like, who does that? And on the other hand, you look at me, I was having all kind of foods in the world, from junk foods to oily foods, and I didn't have to experience that pain in my body of exercise. And I thought, man, these guys are missing a lot of fun. But later I realized that even though the benefits of exercise are not clearly visible, they are very, very significant. Like, you do not get tired easily, which means better productivity at work, which hopefully means a better quality of life. Your immune system gets better, which means you are going to have a lot less diseases. You are going to have a good sleep, which ensures that you are going to have a great day ahead. And later in life, you are going to feel relatively strong. Now, the benefits of physical exercise are pretty much ubiquitous. But what's not well known is mental exercise. See, like applying pressure to your muscles makes them stronger. Our brain works in a similar way. And if I tell you that all the things like anxiety, lack of creativity and intelligence, depression, weak memory, these are not the things you are born with, but these are due to the fogginess and inactiveness of our brain. And just like exercise, if I say that mental exercise will somehow magically fix all the things, would you believe me? Probably not. And I'm not making this claim on thin air. There are tons and tons of research backing it. We think that whatever is going inside our brain are due to outer circumstances, but we couldn't be more wrong. Because each of us lives dependent and bound by our individual knowledge and awareness, and that is what we call reality. However, both knowledge and awareness are equivocal. There are so many things in the world that you are going to feel are surreal, that are going to astound you. Your reality might be someone's illusion. Someone's reality might be your illusion. So, to expand this unexplored horizon, I'll encourage you to try mental exercises. Like, who doesn't want a brain like Lucy? You must have seen the movie Lucy, right? What are the areas of improvement? Well, for starters, we need to improve our awareness. That is, our memory, our ability to quickly and efficiently absorb the information, be it in classrooms or while reading. Second, we need to improve our problem-solving skills. That is, how quickly are we able to analyze the information, how many perspectives are we able to see, and all of those things. So, what can we do to improve all of these things? I would recommend you the king of all mental exercises, and there is no better exercise than this, and it is the board game, chess. The rules are very straightforward to understand. The aim is very clear. The instruction to achieve that aim is also very clear, and hence it acts as a perfect battleground for our mental struggles. Now, the game of chess is played between two players. One chooses to be black and one chooses to be white. And both of the players make consecutive turns. That is, first white plays and then black plays, and then again white plays and then again black plays. And certain entities are under control by both of the players, which are called pieces. As you can see here, these are black pieces and these are white pieces. Now, each of these pieces have certain speciality related to them, and that is, they control squares. What do I mean by that? Let's look here. In this position, this piece is called a knight, and a knight controls the squares which are marked green here. That is generally 2 squares straight and 1 square right and left in any direction. That is, these are the squares which are controlled by this knight. And what do I mean by controlling the square? I mean that if any of the opposition pieces are on those squares, and if it's our turn to move, then I can capture that opposition piece. And right now, as I can see that one of the opposition pieces is on the squares which is controlled by that black knight, and it is the turn for black to move, and so we can capture this pawn. Now, it's white to turn, it's white to move now, and this piece here is called a rook, and rook controls all the squares which are directly straight, either vertically or horizontally. That is, these are the squares that this rook controls, and right now this knight is on one of those squares which is controlled by this rook. So that means I can capture this knight also, and that is how the captures and the squares worked in the chess. So let's go to the original objective of the game, which was to capture the king or to kill the king. Now as you can see the screen right now, these two pieces are called the king, and a king can move in any of the direction one square. That is, these are the squares which is controlled by this white king, and these are the squares which are controlled by the black king. Now in order for white to win this game, he wants this black king on any of these squares. So let's try to do that. It's white to move now. I move my king here. The black king doesn't want to come on any of these squares, because on the next move it would be white to move and the white king can capture the black king. So he went here. Let's just assume that this is not here. Let's just assume that there are only two pieces, these two pieces on this board. Now it's again white to move. White wants that this black king should fall into any of these squares. So let's see, white moves here. Now again black doesn't want to come on these squares, so black moves back. White king moves here, black moves here, white moves here, black moves here, white moves here. Again black doesn't want to come on any of these squares, because it would be captured by the white king next, because it would be white to move next move, and the black king is on the squares which is controlled by the white king. So the black king moves here, again white king moves here, black king moves back, and there we go. And evidently there would not be a situation ever where this black king would go on any of these squares. So this position is called a stalemate. When a king is pitted against a king, there is no way that a king can force another king to go on the squares that he controls. So this situation right here is called a stalemate, assuming that this space is not here. So now in the last scenario we saw that there was no way that we could force a black king to move on to the squares which were controlled by our white king, and hence there was no way to checkmate or kill the black king. So let's try a new situation now. Here I have two rooks, and a rook controls all the squares which are horizontal and vertical to the square on which it is put. So it's white to move now, and I move my rook here. Now black king cannot come here, because in the next turn it would be white to move and the king would be on the square which is controlled by the rook and hence can be captured. With keeping that in mind, black king moves here. I move my rook here. Now again, for the same reason, black king cannot come onto this side of the board, so black king moves here, rook moves here. Similarly, black king cannot go to either of these squares, so it has to move to these squares. Let's say he moves here, I move my rook here. Now again, these are the only three choices where the black king can move, so the king moves here. Now we are in a very interesting situation. If I play my rook to this square, then let's say I have played my rook to this square. Now this black king, wherever it moves, irrespective of the fact that wherever this black king moves, it would be captured. It's gonna be captured. Let's say it is going to move here, but it's wiped to move next turn, and it is on one of those squares which is controlled by this rook, and hence it would be captured. If it moves here, then it would be captured by this rook. So we have arrived at a situation where we have forced the black king into such situation that no matter where he moves, he is gonna be captured. And this situation, my friends, is known as a checkmate. So let's try a similar scenario with some slight change. And in this situation, the black also have one rook. So let's try to do what we did last time and move my rook here. The king cannot go to any of these squares because it's gonna be captured. So king moves here. I move my rook here. Again, king cannot go here because if it goes here, then it would be white to move next, and king is on one of those squares which is controlled by this rook and hence gonna be killed. So that's why king moves here. I move my rook here. King moves here. I move my rook here. King finally moves here, and I move my rook to this. So now, if we look at the situation, the king cannot go to any of the squares. King cannot go here. If it goes here, then it's white to turn next, and king is on one of those squares which is controlled by this rook, and hence it's gonna be captured. It is similar to all of these squares. Similar situation arises when the king goes to any of these squares. So, is the game over? Is the king killed? No, there is one escape route for the king, this rook. That is, now king cannot move, but this rook can swing up to this square, and hence now the king cannot be captured. Right now this king cannot be captured by this rook because this rook is in front of the king. So in order to capture the king, this rook would have to capture this rook. And what happens if I capture this rook? Now this white rook is on one of those squares which is controlled by this black king, and it is black to move now, and hence this king will capture this rook. And that is how situation unfolded in this scenario. So I hope that the objective of the game is pretty clear to you now, and let's look at some more pieces and how they do move. So this piece right here, it's called queen, and it is the most powerful piece in the game of chess because it can move in any of the directions, namely horizontally, vertically and diagonally from the square where it is placed. So the queen can move from here to here, from here to here, here to here again. These two pieces right here, they are called bishops, and the bishop can move only diagonally. That is, this bishop can move to only any of these squares, and right now this bishop can move to any of these squares. One thing you have to notice here, that this bishop right here cannot move to these two squares because these two squares are blocked by other pieces. So it cannot jump from here to here, and that is where this piece knight comes in. A knight can jump over other pieces, so it can move from here to here to here to any of the places. But the knight cannot move here because the bishop is already there. That square is already covered by the bishop, so the knight can move over other pieces. So like this. Similarly, the rook cannot move over other pieces, so it cannot go to any of these squares, or here it can only move to these two squares. Now this piece right here, it's called a pawn, and in the initial setup of the board, all the pawns are placed on the second row like this. Now the movement of this piece is very special, and how is that? If a pawn has never moved before in the game, and if it's the first move for this pawn, then it can move either one square or two square in the straight direction. But after the pawn have registered its first move, then it can only move one square in the straight direction. Now let me ask you a question. Can this pawn capture this king? Because earlier what used to happen, that if an opponent piece is on one of those squares which is controlled by our piece, and if it's our turn to move, then we can capture that piece. But it is not the case with the pawn. The pawn moves in straight direction, but it captures diagonally. That is, it cannot capture this king, but the pawn can capture this knight. It can only capture diagonally, and it can only move in the straight direction. It cannot move backward. And those are the rules for the movement of the piece called pawn. So now you have understood the basic movement of all the pieces and the objective. So let's try to play a game from very beginning. So it's white to move right now, and can I move this rook to any of these squares? No, because in order to do that, the rook has to jump over this pawn, which is not possible. And also the rook cannot go to any of these squares because these are already occupied by some other pieces. Now, can I move this knight? Yes, because the knight can move over other pieces, so I can place my knight here. Now, can black move its bishop? A bishop moves diagonally, so can the black put his bishop here? No, because in order to get here, the black bishop would have to jump over this pawn, which is also not possible. So let's say black wants to move a pawn. Now it's the first move for this pawn, so it can either move one square or two square in the straight direction. So let's say it goes there. Now it's again white to move, and white can move any of these pawns, or white can move this knight to any of these two squares, or white can move this knight to any of these squares. So let's say white plays the move this. Again, now it's black to move. Black can also play any of these pawns, either one square or two square in the straight direction, or black can move its knight here. Now it's again white to move, and now I can move this bishop to any of these squares because now there is no pawn here. Or I can move my queen here. I cannot move my queen here because there is a knight here, but I can move my queen here because there is no pawn. So let's say I move my bishop to this square, and now it's white to move. So let's say, black to move. So let's say black move his knight here, and that is how typically a chess game starts. Now these are the only rules that you need to learn in order to start chess, and I recommend you to do that as early as possible. But right now, looking at this position, you might wonder that how could I possibly reach the position where I could checkmate this king? And I'll say you are right, because in order to reach that position, you need to follow several strategies and plans. One strategy might be you are looking forward to trade all your weak pieces like these pawns with the black bishops and knights and rooks, and in that way, in the end, you would be having stronger pieces which could lead to checkmate. But that is one of the strategies, but not all of them. And I'll give you an example. A computer system called Deep Blue was only taught these basic rules, and by playing with himself, that computer became the greatest chess player, greatest chess playing thing that ever existed in the history of mankind. So let's look at the game, and I started with one e4, and every square on the board of chess have a name. These coordinates are A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and these are vertical coordinates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this pawn right here lies on the E column and 4th row. So that means this square is named E4. Similarly, my opponent pushed the pawn to E5. After that, I moved my queen here because the queen can move in any direction, either straight or in diagonal directions, so it can move over here. After that, my opponent played this knight here because a knight can jump over any of the pieces, and my next move was my bishop to C4 because bishop can only move diagonally. Now, this position is very interesting. As you can see, this pawn right here can be captured by this knight because it is on one of those squares which is controlled by this knight. And which are the other squares that knight controls? This square is controlled by the knight, these, all of these squares are controlled by the knight. But what happens if the knight takes this pawn? For starters, this pawn is, or this square is under the control of one of our piece, which is queen. That is, so if the knight captures this pawn, we can capture the pawn back with the help of our queen. So let's see. But right now there is a better move. Instead of capturing this knight, I can go here and capture this pawn. But you might wonder, this square is under the control of this king, right? So if I go here, the king can capture my queen, but that's not it, because if the king captures this queen, this square is under the control of this bishop, and hence that would result in a checkmate. So the king cannot capture this queen, and what else the king can do? The king can go here, but after it goes here, the queen can capture the king because this square is controlled by this queen. So this was a typical game where we reached the position of checkmate in the very early stage. So this was it guys for the video, and if you like it, I can make more videos on this chess series. And before you go, hit that like and subscribe button below. Thank you.